So we've talked about long-term causes of the American Revolution. So now we're going to talk about those little things that get on the colonists' nerves. So it's going to be like every year things are going on. And eventually it just becomes too much and they'll break away. So the first cause we're going to look at is the Sugar Act. And so what has happened is England has fought a lot of wars. And so this link would take you to a listing of all of the wars that Britain had been involved in. And the problem with wars is that they cost a lot of money. When a country needs to raise revenue or money, the way they raise revenue and money is by taxing their citizens, their people. So Britain is in huge amounts of debt, and they're in huge amount of debt because of this recent war, the French and Indian War. But I mean, it's just been years, centuries of them fighting wars. The French and Indian War was also about protecting the colonies. So when they're looking at their bank accounts, England feels that the colonists should help out with the paying of the bill. Like, we sent our military over there to help fight and protect you, so you should pay some of those costs, like the British citizens are doing who live in England. So they start putting taxes on the colonists. Now, they've always had taxes, they've always had things going on. It's just that the colonists are not very good about paying those taxes. Like, England's so far away, no one's really examining every single little thing that the colonists are doing. So it's kind of easy for them to cheat, to, kind of say, oh, it was a bad year. We didn't really make that much. So people are they weren't really honest in their taxes. But as England is really in need of money now, they are really going to enforce these taxes. So this is an old tax. They just kind of do a revision on it. And when Britain starts to enforce the tax, the colonists resist. So Britain is determined that the colonists are going to pay the tax. They are allowing their tax collectors to go around. They're allowing their courts more power because they really need the money. In the past, they've been pretty lax or they've been pretty easy with the taxes. As long as some money was coming in, they really didn't get up in arms too often. But now it's not going to be that case. Now they're going to go ahead and they're really going to be enforcing these tax codes. So the colonists resist, and how they resist is smuggling. So they're going to smuggle in sugar, and they're not going to be paying the taxes. So Britain knows that the colonists are doing things that are cheating them out of their taxes, cheating them out of the money. And so Britain is starting to get a little irritated. They're kind of already irritated anyway through some stuff that's already been going on in the colonies. Even though the colonies did help in the French and Indian War, they kicked and screamed the whole time with it. There was a lot of stuff going on with the military and the colonists. So England's already kind of a little annoyed with their kids, and now the kids are just cheating behind their back and they're smuggling in. They're becoming pirates to get the sugar in so that they don't have to pay the taxes. All right. England now knows they're not collecting as much as they should on the Sugar Act, so now they're going to do a Stamp Act. So Stamp Act in 1765, Parliament and the King, they're going to issue a tax on all paper goods. So you're smuggling in, your sugar, and you're not paying the tax on it. But we're going to get you this way. When we talk about paper tax, anything that's a legal document has a court stamp on it. Well, now they're gonna tax you on it. So stamps, legal papers, legal documents, all that stuff is gonna have an extra fee on it, a tax on it. When this extra fee, extra tax gets added, and it's added to legal documents, the people who deal with legal documents on a daily basis, lawyers, get upset. when you get lawyers upset, they know the law, they know how to read the law, and they are professional arguers. They argue. That's what they do to make their money. That's what they do for their job. So now you've got those people upset. So they're going to get people gathered together so that they can go ahead and protest this. The colonists in general are pretty outraged about this tax. Why should they have to pay these taxes? They're getting, they just had that Sugar Act. They've had the proclamation where they can't go westward. So they've had some things where they're getting kind of upset too. So they decide to get together and form this thing called a Stamp Act Congress. So they're going to formally protest the tax. So they're not going to smuggle. They're going to keep doing that with most of the things that they like. But they're also going to now unify. They're going to unite in this meeting. All it is a meeting of the colonists. And they're going to write a protest letter to the Parliament and the King stating that this law needs to be repealed, or what we also call canceled. And they write a very elegant argument. If you do this, here's going to be the economic effects on us here in the colonies. We also feel like this is not really fair. It's not really just. We haven't had a say in the tax. And then after they write the letter, they send it over there to the Parliament. They're also going to boycott any of the items that are in this. So they're not going to buy any of the stamps. They're not going to be doing this with illegal stuff. So they're just going to refuse to purchase the goods. So when they refuse to purchase the goods, the tax money is not going to get collected anyway. So you can have a tax, but you wouldn't be collecting any money on it. Some of the other colonists are going to resort to violence. So we do have, by this point, the Sons of Liberty forming. And the Sons of Liberty are guys in Boston, but they're in other places. It just kind of starts there in Boston. The Sons of Liberty are led by Samuel Adams and John Hancock. And they have been the targets of British tax collectors. Like, they're business owners, and they have been really viciously targeted, in their opinion, by the British tax collectors. Like, they're coming in, they're messing up their shop, their stores, their business. They're harassing them constantly about money and how much money they owe and stuff. Just, they're picking fights with them. That's how they feel. So they are gathering followers. They're gathering friends to join them in the Sons of Liberty in their acts of rebellion against England. So England's got a boycott on this tax. Like, the colonists just aren't doing it. They got a letter, and now they know that there's kind of some resistance with the Sons of Liberty group. So when Parliament gets all of this and they process it, they go ahead and they decide to repeal the act. So Parliament does actually get rid of the act. But you have to think about it like this. They've cried, they've whined, the colonists have protested, and they've said, they don't want this law, this tax. And Parliament gave in. They went ahead and they got rid of it. So what do you think is going to happen the next time Parliament puts another tax on the colonists? The colonists are going to do the same thing, and they're going to expect the same result. So I always kind of give you the example of, it's like when a kid goes to a store and they cry, "Mom, Mom, 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 Mom," because they want that toy or that candy. And if a mom gives in or a dad gives in and they just give it to them, the next time the kid goes to that same place, they're going to do the same thing and they're going to expect the same results. It's kind of a dangerous precedent to set. It's a dangerous thing to do. But that is what's going to go on with the Stamp Act and the Stamp Act Congress. They're going to learn that if they write letters, if they protest and they boycott, that they're going to be able to get their way, and Parliament is going to back down and get rid of the act or the tax that they don't like. I mean, and this is their propaganda right over here. So they're saying, "Oh, the fatal stamp," and they got the death mark on it. They're saying that this tax is going to be the death of them, that this tax is going to burden them so much that they won't have any money. Okay? And now they just got what they wanted. That is thrown out the door. Parliament is not going to enforce it. So the next thing that's going to start with the colonists is this kind of slogan, no taxation without representation. And this really becomes a rallying cry for the colonists. So everybody can kind of understand this. They know that they agree on this part. What it's talking about is Parliament. So the colonists feel that it is unfair that Parliament is taxing them, like with the Stamp Act and the Sugar Act, because there is not a colonist in Parliament. Like, Parliament is made up of British citizens who live in Britain, 3,000 miles away. Parliament does not have one colonist in it. And it is kind of become of a distance thing, right? So you have that huge distance. So how would you go to the meetings and stuff? I mean, you could go over there and live for a couple years and represent the colonies. I think that would be a possibility. But Britain and Parliament are just not allowing the colonists that opportunity. So the colonists feel that it is unfair to tax them. It is unfair to levy all these taxes on them, because they've never really been able to have a voice, vote on them, and so they feel like they shouldn't have to pay the taxes. Parliament thinks that the colonists are like insane. They're just like, you guys don't understand what representation is. What representation is what they call universal representation. One British citizen represents all British citizens. So even though those guys in Parliament don't live in the colonies, those colonists are still British citizens, and the Parliament people are thinking of them, they care about them, and they're going to voice any concerns that the people in the colonies have. So they feel like they're being represented. In a British viewpoint, they feel that the colonies have no reason to be upset. Like, you are being represented. You have people who are voting on these laws. You just don't like them. The colonists hit back with, how can you voice our concerns when you've never been here to the colonies? You don't know our struggles. You don't know what's going on over here. It's a different world over here than it is in England. So we don't feel that you really understand us to represent us. So they feel like, because there's not this requirement to have lived in the colonies to represent them, they feel like the Parliament and everything Parliament's doing shouldn't apply to them. When we create our U.S. government, that is a requirement for our representatives. Our senators and our House members have to live in the state they represent. You have to live there. Because how would you know what the problems of North Carolina actually are unless you've lived in North Carolina? North Carolina, we're worried about hurricanes during the summer and the early part of September and October now. Like, we go all the way in there. Like, that's our concern. We don't really worry so much about blizzards, because snow really in North Carolina doesn't kind of exist, but our concern is hurricane and hurricane preparedness, getting the power back on, making certain we don't have flooding. But people who live in California, they're not concerned about hurricanes. Their concerns are a lot different. So you actually have to live someplace in our perspective in order to understand it. And that is what they're arguing with Parliament. But Parliament and the colonists are not seeing eye to eye on what a good representative looks like. What does representation mean? And so no taxation without representation is going to be the rallying cry for the colonies. And that's the tarring and feathering of those tax collectors. And that's what the Sons of Liberty are going to be doing, because they're going to still protest.